taking veneer off is one thing, right? Because then you're most likely exposing raw wood underneath, right? But what about if you find a painted piece and you're like, hey, let's take this to natural wood? Do either of you guys like to do that very much?
Like to do it?
I say like with
like
air quotes.
Yeah,
right?
Love what it looks like after.
Right.
Hello, listening friends. Today we have the privilege of talking to the winners of the November 2020 Zebra Review Contest. Our theme was earth tones. Makes sense, doesn't it? We leave the bright colors of fall in October for barren trees in November, exposing all the browns and grays, which are pretty as well in their own right. We just announced the winners last week, and we are going to chat with them shortly. We'll hear about the details of each of their winning pieces, and then we'll have a panel discussion on the topic exposed wood. Before we do that, we want to thank our judges and the effort they put into reviewing the hundreds of pieces each month. They are Katie with Katie and Company Furniture Restorations, Lauren with Portland Rose Studio, Keegan with Lemon Drops Reclaimed, Natalie with A Ray of Sunlight, and our guest judge for November, Jenna with Happy Valley Restorations. We also want to thank our prize sponsors again, really terrific group of companies and wonderful prizes, Mud Paint, The Lawless Hardware, Surf Prep Sanding, and of course, Zebra Paintbrushes. Listeners, if you are able to check out these pieces while you listen to the podcast, they are featured on our podcast page for you to enjoy. Just go to thezebrablog.com and click on the podcast. Okay, friends, let's learn and be inspired as we talk to the winners. We have Rachel with Upcycled Smithery winning first place, Megan with Megdell Design taking second, and Deanne with Sitting Pretty by Deanne snatching third. Congratulations to all three of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All of these contests are so much fun because we throw out the theme, as a challenge, and every time we get phenomenal results across the board, and we always have incredible pieces to showcase on our accounts and on our podcast. Okay, you guys know me. I have to find out where you're from, and let's see. Oh yes, the weather. I got to find out about the weather. Let's start with you, Rachel. You live in Maryland, right?
Yes.
So what part of Maryland do you live in?
I live in a very small town called Millington. It's on the upper eastern shore.
Okay. So if I wanted to go to Baltimore, how far are you from Baltimore?
About an hour and a half. I'm closer to the Delaware line where I live.
Okay. So do you like where you live?
I do. I like the small town life. I like that it's quiet. And it's close to beaches.
Oh, that's super, isn't it? So you guys make your way to the beach often?
A couple times a year.
That sounds like, as I think you're probably like us as well. It's like you'd like to go more often than you really get to go. Because we live depends on what part of the coast you go to, but we probably live about, on average, 4.5, 5 hours. So it's not too bad. I mean, it can be done, in a day, maybe spend the night, come back the next day type thing. But it's nice just to get to the coast. So are you from Maryland?
I am. I'm from a little bit north where I live now. I grew up closer to Baltimore, in Harford County, Maryland.
You've hunkered down in Maryland and you've set your roots there then.
That's right.
That's great. So what's your weather like today?
It's very cold and windy. We got some snow and slush last night, so it's pretty icy and yucky out right now.
Oh, shoot. So that means you can't do your refinishing outdoors, right?
It's going to be so cold out there today.
I'm curious, with where you live, do you find that you have a lot to choose from regarding furniture pieces to refinish?
I do. For some reason, I get really lucky where I am. And I pick up a lot of really cool old freebies. But I have really good customers too, that, will know if I'm looking for something and message me or give me things that they don't want anymore. So I am pretty stocked up right now.
So you said freebies. Like, how do you get freebies now? Are you like getting them off this? Because I'm always interested in Instagram stories, and a lot of times people will post these where they're driving along and they see this piece on the side of the road. It's free for anybody who wants to take it. Like, does that happen for you?
Sometimes, I think it's mostly like Facebook Marketplace. If I see a freebie that's local, I'll go grab it.
You can't do any better than a freebie, can you? You got good margins there. So Megan, you live in Tennessee. Where at in Tennessee?
Yeah, so we live in Clarksville, Tennessee, which is about just like under an hour, I'd say, from Nashville. So we're almost closer to the Kentucky border, but we've been here about a year now, which is crazy. But yes, Middle Tennessee.
Yeah, and it's interesting you said a year because I do recall when you did move. So, and where did you move from?
Yeah, so we have kind of been little nomads. Before we had our son, we lived in Morgantown, West Virginia, while my husband was
Uh-huh.
doing school there. But we are originally from Wisconsin, so we're used to colder temperatures. So I love that I get to kind of tell my family how warm it is here. Like today it's 32 and sunny, which seems kind of chilly, but back home it's like it can be negative degrees. So I'm always like, yes, it's 32 and the sun is shining. So I feel like I
Yeah,
get to brag a little bit to them.
yeah, you can, and it's so warm out there today, balmy and warm. You're probably doing your refinishing outside.
I know it's like shorts weather, it always is the Wisconsin person that's walking around and you're like, oh my gosh,
That's
like
right.
put a jacket on, but you're like, no, this is warm. It feels great.
All right, this is cool. By the
Yeah.
way, how is your little man doing?
He's good. He is turning 9 months on Sunday, which is like
Wow.
the craziest thing for me to say out loud. But he's moving and grooving. He's not walking yet, but I fear it's soon. He's so
Yeah.
busy all the time. So I have my hands full, but I love it.
Yeah, it's so interesting at this age because it's like they're making these massive developments in a short amount of time. And like you
Totally.
said, like if he's crawling and moving by crawling with his elbows and feet, boy, I tell you, when they get up and they can walk, it's such a cool thing. But it's also, I mean, there's a lot to it.
Totally. It's like
Yeah,
you're excited for them, but then there's like this whole level of fear that's like wrapped around my smile. Like, oh my God, it's happening. Like
I
you're
know.
doing big things, buddy.
I know. I guess the good thing about it is when they do walk, they're standing, but they're not tall yet, so at least they don't have as far to fall, right? So the fall's
Totally.
not
Yeah.
as bad.
Exactly.
That's great. Well, Deanne, listen, Deanne, I have to first apologize that we have you up pretty early. I mean, you're all the way out there in California, and with our recording time, it means it is a bit early for you. I have to ask you first, are you a morning person?
Luckily, I would consider myself a morning person. And with
All right.
with two kids that I got to get up to get ready for school anyway. Even though they're doing school at home, they still have to start at a certain time. So
Yeah.
we're always up by this time. It's like a little after 8 now, so it's
Yeah.
not too bad.
Although you're not usually on a podcast at 8 a.m. either.
That is true. Yeah, I made sure to have time for a cup of coffee.
I know. So, California, you must be in wonderful weather, like sunny, warm. Am I like totally skewed here?
Well, you would be right for a lot of the times, but today we actually got some rain. Actually, like right when we got up this morning, it started downpouring. But I think that's about it of the storm. So it's already, the sun's already coming back out. So I don't
Oh,
think it'll be
wow.
too bad today. Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
only, I mean, you guys talk about like 30 degrees, and I can hardly even imagine that. I mean, I think today will be almost 60. So
Wow.
30 is like really cold for us, and that would be like middle of the night or in the early morning, and then it would warm up. So yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know how you guys do it with those harsh winters.
I don't either, and I'm in North Carolina. I mean, I'm probably pretty pathetic because I just determined, I've come to the conclusion that the older that I get, the more Summer and spring, I love. I just, there's something about, I think what it is I like to be outdoors more than I like to be indoors. And it's just, in the summertime, you just, you're inside, you walk outside, you don't have to change your clothes or put on heavy clothing. And, it's pretty out. I don't know. It's just, it's really hard to beat the spring and summer, but winter's pretty too. And you get all the snow and it's cozy, I guess you could say. So California is a big state. So give us an idea of where you're at in California.
Yeah, so I'm in Modesto, which is really the biggest city in the Central Valley, which is, to give you some perspective, is like more inland from the Bay Area. So, we're maybe like a couple hours from the beach, or, about 2 hours from San Francisco. We're maybe a little over an hour from the mountains. So it's kind of a really great location to just, whatever you feel like doing, you can get there in a day and do a day trip, which is nice. So, but we definitely, so for us, it's more the opposite. We don't have the harsh winters, but our summers are definitely pretty hot. So for me, I can refinish outside most of the winter, but really it's summertime, that we'll get multiple like 100-degree days or things like that. And so that's when it's like, okay, I can't be out here. I got to work inside.
That's so interesting because it's like, it's almost the opposite. Like you said, it's so warm in the wintertime or there that it's perfect, ideal refinishing. But then when you get into the summer, it's just too hot. Okay, let's get to your winning pieces. Dan, you won third place. And I have to say, this is one of those pieces that really turned out beautiful, but I'm not sure I would have thought to go in the direction that you went in. That's really creative. Typically this style is painted, but it really works what you did with it. Tell us all about it.
Oh, thank you. So it is actually a custom piece for a client. And so when my client originally showed it to me, it was fully painted and had lots of veneer damage. So she loves raw wood pieces, and I've done a number of pieces for her. And so she was really hoping we could get it as, sort of natural wood looking as possible. And so I said, well, I'm up for the challenge, So, I started by first stripping off. I had to strip the veneer off the top and both of the sides because it was, pretty buckled and had splits and stuff. And so since we were going for a natural wood piece, I couldn't patch them or repair them. So I had to just take them off. So the top ended up being a really pretty, it has sort of like the planked look to it. So that worked out really nicely. But then the sides were really just sort of like a plywood that under the veneer. So unfortunately, that part, we had to kind of figure out, okay, what could we do there? And so I suggested putting some cane webbing over the plywood to sort of disguise just that ugly wood grain. And so my customer really liked that idea. And so we went with it. So that was the first time I did that. So it was really fun and interesting to try that. But yeah, so on the rest of the piece, then I had to strip paint off, and then underneath the paint, it had been stained like a dark color prior to being painted. So there was lots of paint stripper and sanding on this piece, a lot, but I think it all paid off eventually.
Yeah, and I would equate that with a ton of work. That's a lot of elbow grease.
Yeah, it definitely took a while. I ended up using citrus strip for most of the painted spots that I needed to take off. So that product, it works better on, I don't know if it has to do with the paint, but sometimes it works and sometimes it seems like it doesn't. But luckily on this piece, it worked pretty well. So it was kind of like I would just paint on a ton of citrus strip and I'd wrap it up in plastic wrap and let it sit as long as I could. And then for the most part, it came off with that first just, main stripping session. And then I had to do some more sanding then to get a little bit more of that dark stain off that was underneath. And yeah, but it all came together. I ended up then doing like a really light whitewash of paint, just so the wood wouldn't warm up too much when I sealed it. My customer really kind of wanted like as light of a wood tone as possible. But she really likes seeing all the wood grain. So I didn't want to like cover it up with too much of like a white stain or anything like that. So I just did a light wash of paint and then sealed it. I used actually all the Chippy Barn products. And so I sealed it with, they have a newer product called Lux Tones. That's, like a stain and top coat all in one. And so they have one that's called Pickled, and it's a white color, but it's really subtle. Especially if you're already starting on like a light piece of wood that's not too dark. So it just kind of helps keep it from warming up too much. So, and then we stuck with the original hardware. She likes the antique kind of vintage looking hardware. She didn't want to replace it. So we just cleaned it up and put it all back together. And it's actually still here at my house too. I haven't gotten to deliver it to her yet because she's a couple hours away from us. So we just haven't really coordinated that yet, but
I bet she's eager to get this home.
It's funny. So, I met her last year and I did like 7 pieces for her, I think it was last year. And then when I delivered those ones to her, she gave me 3 more. So the big dresser was one, and then I have 2 like smaller side tables I need to finish still. But she's actually redoing her house. And so she's still in that process. So she's not in a rush to get them back. Yeah. She's kind of just been, doing things over time and not really in a rush. And then sort of with the craziness of this year, I think things are taking a little longer than she had anticipated anyway. Yeah. But she's been so particular too, because she hasn't wanted to see pictures. She just wants to see it in person when it's all done. And so it's like, yes, I'm over here just dying. I'm like, I can't wait for her to see it.
It's so funny because I was going to say, well, she must be really proud of it because I'm sure she's seen your Instagram account, but
I know. She's not on social media or anything. So it's like, I'll share all the pictures with her after I deliver everything, and I'll definitely tell her she has an award-winning piece now.
Yeah. Wow, that's cool though. I mean, that's like folks who choose to find out what the sex of their baby is, and they just wait till delivery.
Yeah,
it's
really.
all one big surprise.
So much patience.
That's right, exactly. Well, it's patience and trust too, because to not want to be able to take a peek along the process, she really has a lot of confidence in your work. So that's a huge compliment to you.
Yeah, thank you. For sure. I mean, we met, last year, and like I said, I did a number of pieces for her, and I think our styles really clicked, and every time we would talk about a piece, I mean, we were like on the same page as far as like the vision for it went. And so, it's been a great relationship working with her. Yeah.
Yeah, well, she'll be excited when she gets it, and then you're gonna just have to make sure she understands that this won an award. She's got an award-winning piece, right?
For sure, yeah, it's so cool.
Deanne, how would you describe your style? I'm sort of flowing through your Instagram account now, and for those that want to know more about you, like how would you sort of articulate the style that you work on and create?
Yeah, that's a hard one sometimes because I really find myself not necessarily drawn to one particular type of furniture or style or anything like that. I really like to incorporate a lot of different styles, especially in my own personal home decor. But I would say I'm like a maybe modern eclectic kind of mix. I like a lot of textures and things too. And so that was definitely where like adding the cane to the sides of this piece was just like right up my alley. And I was super excited to do it.
That turned out so beautiful. I've never seen that, Deanne. I love that so much. I think that added texture, it was such a fun surprise to see on the sides, like such a beautiful way to create some texture and still keep it within that natural like style that you went for with her. I love it.
Oh, thank you so much. That means a lot. Yeah, and cane and like rattan and bamboo and all of that wicker, it's making such a huge comeback. I mean, it has been for years, but it's definitely very much around still. I mean, you can find, newer pieces of furniture being made with cane and all of that. So it's really big right now. So I love all that. I think it just gives, such a added dimension to your pieces or to your home, if you have pieces like that. But I also definitely love having exposed wood on a lot of my pieces. I honestly probably haven't really fully painted a piece in a long time. I think if there's some sort of wood that I can keep exposed, I always love to. I mean, it doesn't always work out, but yeah, so I love having, different wood tones and things too.
Yeah, this was a great transformation, Deanne. Congratulations on winning third. Share your Instagram account for our listeners.
Thanks so much. Yeah, it's sitting pretty _by_Deanne.
Great. Megan, well, let me first mention that it's great to see you back in the game again. There was a little bit of a pause, which was legitimate and important, right?
Totally, yes. Thanks. It's good to be back. Slow but sure.
Yes. Well, you won second place with your antique buffet, and you mentioned in your post that this is a one of a kind, and we agree, it really is stunning. Tell us about it, and tell us why you say it's one of a kind.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm so excited. This antique buffet, I don't see a lot of these in my area, or at least they always feel like so special because they're harder to come by. So I saw this on Facebook Marketplace and I kind of jumped the gun and I said, I'll take it. It's a fuzzy picture, but that's okay. I want it. And so my husband, bless his heart, went and picked it up for me. Said it was a pretty fun, interesting encounter with an older gentleman. But when he got it into our garage, yeah, he was like, it was an interesting fellow, but it's a really pretty piece. So we got it into the garage and I was like so excited because typically when you get these antique pieces, there are so many like veneer damages and chips and things like that. And it was pristine. So I was like, his fuzzy pictures didn't do it justice, but there were just a few scratches on top. That was it. So I was like, oh my gosh, I feel like I just hit the jackpot. And similar to you, Deanne, like I love keeping an aspect of the natural wood if I can. And the tone of it was really pretty too. Like it wasn't too orange or too, just like those older pieces. You don't know what's in that finish. So after cleaning it up, it was really beautiful. So I had been so excited. I wanted to use milk paint for this piece. And I have been wanting to use Kristen's at Shacto Interiors, her Magnolia Pier for, I don't know, forever. So I was like, oh, this is perfect. It'll work for the Zebra review. So I went through, cleaned it up. And I was like, okay, if I can get a little chippy, this will be just fantastic. Well, I got a ton, like the whole piece chipped. So I was like thrilled, but also very nervous as well. And there were times that I definitely doubted myself because there was a drawer that I think 90% chipped off. And then the top, I think, was almost completely chipped. And then you could see a few of those scratches, like the only scratch in the piece. And I was like, dang it chipped right off where that was. So I had to go back and do a little bit of prep work. So I sanded it down like really lightly and then did a second like application of the milk paint. And at that point, I was so in my head, it takes me a little bit longer to finish pieces now just because I'm chasing after a little guy most of the time. So I was staring at it in my garage every time we would go for a walk. And I was just like, I don't know. I think that it's maybe too chippy or maybe there's some variation, which if you know anything about milk paint, like that's natural. And that's what's so beautiful about it too, is it's authentic and it's not very cohesive. Like there's that variation that you just can't replicate. So I'm really thankful to a lot of the refinishers in the community who helped me get out of my own head, reassured me I was overthinking. And so really once I stopped to kind of just like let go of the expectation, like, well, what if someone doesn't like chippy? well, if you don't like a little chippy, you're probably not going to love this piece. But for me, I like, that's gold. It's like something you really can't recreate like very easily, right? Milk paint has its own mind and does what it wants. So the fact that I was able to get so much authentic natural chipping, I was like, wait, no, it is gold. I should just appreciate this for what it is. And once I kind of let go of those like expectations and or like just wondering what other people would think, I was like, wow, this is so cool. Like it worked, it chipped. I got this incredible finish that can truly never be recreated to that exact finish. So I was so excited. So yes, my first like ultimately chippy piece, and I couldn't be more happy. So it was even sweeter to have it win this second place. So thank you.
Yeah, it came out really beautifully.
Yeah,
thank you so
absolutely.
much.
So the front of the piece, Megan, is that one coat or is that two coats or what how does that? Because you said you put two coats on the top, right?
Yep. So the whole piece got 2 coats of paint. So the top and the one of the drawers, I did have to kind of like sand off that original painted version, if you will, and reapply just because it was so chippy. I wanted to give it a little bit more coverage, so it kind of blended together and covered the like 3 scratches that were on top. So it was about 2 coats total across the
Okay.
piece.
So maybe for, milk paint newbies, people who are wanting to try milk paint. So when you lay down your first coat of milk paint and you start seeing that kind of, this is probably not the right way to say it, but almost like a bubbling up. I mean, you see
Yep.
it starting to come up. Do
Yeah,
you
exactly.
then, do you sand that before you put a second coat on, or do you just let it do what it's going to do, let it fully dry, and then put your second coat on top of that?
Yeah, so I ended up kind of taking my hand a little bit over it and kind of removing some of that, but ultimately I did just paint right over it. And so
Okay.
the first coat of paint, truly, I only got a little bit of bubbling up and I was like, oh, right, here we go, chippy. And then by the time I came back after my second coat, so I did kind of just apply that second coat pretty quickly after it was dried. And then being that I didn't have a lot of time to come back to it, maybe a day or two later, I came back and saw all of it bubbling. And I was like, oh my God, I hope that there's some paint left after I take my hand over it. So I think you can kind of do it both ways, but I painted over that first coat pretty quickly. And I only just removed a little bit of the flakiness in some spots where I could see it was otherwise going to gather up in my finish, if that makes sense.
Yep. And then you obviously, I mean, I say obviously, I'm assuming that's new hardware that you put on.
Yeah, so it had all of its original hardware intact, but it was very ornate. So it's beautiful, but I think to just kind of bring it into more of like a modern day, just make it fit in with
Mm-hmm.
today's decor. Like those drop poles, I feel like are so classic. So those are from Lawless hardware, and yeah, it definitely was a piece that kind of needed to take some of the detail out of the scroll work. There were just a lot of really ornate details to it that I think the chippy kind of took over and kind of made it a little bit more new age, if you will.
Yeah, no, it's a smart decision, and the I guess it's maybe like an off white or a white really pops off of that backdrop of the chippy look that you have there. So it's really pretty.
Thank you. Yeah, there's even like a little angel, like a golden little angel on the back plate. It was very, very unique detail. So like painting over some of that, it's cool that you can see it with the paint, but it's not so like fancy now, I guess, if you will. It's like very, very different style. My husband's like, I don't know about this piece. And then as it started to like go through its transformation, he goes, do you think we should keep this piece? And I was like, maybe.
Well, I was going to ask you that. Did you keep it or are you selling it? What's the story on that?
So I did keep it for the time being. I couldn't part with it. Like my thought was when I got this piece, I was like, I'll paint it. This will be one that I'll flip. Like I will sell it. It won't be in our house. And then the finish being so unique, I was like, wait, this is so one of a kind that I like need to hold on to it at least for a little bit. And so, yeah, I sealed it up with hemp oil. And by doing that, I kind of was like, oh, I also have never done a super chippy piece like this. So for my own research, I'm going to say is like, I want to see if it will continue to chip. It shouldn't, but I was like, I should probably hold on to it for a little bit just to make sure, right? So
Quality testing.
Yeah. So it's across from our bed in our master bedroom. And so it's so fun that I get to see it every day. So I get to enjoy it at least for a little while.
Yeah. Wow, that's really, really nice. Now, I'm going to ask you as well, describe your style for us.
Yeah, I have a hard time. I feel like I gravitate towards so many styles and can appreciate them, but I really love kind of like a modern farmhouse, but in the respect that, yeah, keeping some of those original characteristics or details that some of these antique pieces have. I love that so much. So I tend to enjoy distressing or keeping some of that exposed wood, kind of blending those different styles between almost like a modern antique, if you will. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I never
No,
know how to
it's good.
describe it.
I know,
No,
that's a
that's a good
hard question.
Well, really, really nice work, Meg, and congrats on winning second. Share your Instagram account so our listeners can look you up.
Yeah, thank you so much. So my Instagram, you can follow me at Meg Dell Design.
Rachel, you won first place, and your winning piece is a pine sideboard, and you left this piece natural, and you made the right decision. I mean, it is beautiful as well. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so I found it on Facebook Marketplace, and as soon as I saw it, I just knew like it had to be naked. So I grabbed it up real quick. I think the lady had like a whole list of people waiting for it, and it was like $20. So I went and grabbed it, and I could tell right away, like the original stain was already really worn, so it was going to sand fairly easy. And it did. I used my Surf Prep sander. Yeah, I got in all those little areas on the doors and everything, but it sanded down pretty well. So it did still have like that gold tone that I didn't really want. I wanted the wood to be pretty light. So I used Minwax white, like a half coat of Minwax white over the entire piece. And I sealed it with the Chippy Barnes clear wax.
That's really interesting because both you and Deanne did similar things as far as taking the wood tone and adjusting it to your liking by adding some sort of translucent white to it. And that's, I mean, I don't know if that's just commonplace, but that sounds really brilliant. I love that. And I know
I do it a lot, and I wondered if other refinishers do that too. So I was happy to hear that she did that too. The other thing that really drew me to that piece was the little white porcelain knobs that were original. So I went ahead and kept those and added some metal label frames just for added cuteness.
I was just going to say, yeah, I really liked how you added the file label pieces, and then how it kind of matches the hinges too, are the nice black, and it's just a nice contrast to the wood.
Yeah, and the little white knobs, it's neat that you were able to keep those. I'm just really curious, do you know anything about this piece, like the furniture brand or the maker, anything at all?
I don't. There was nothing on it. It was all solid pine, really nice shape, but no, there was no label or anything on it.
I was just wondering, I don't know if you guys have seen this, and I may be way off the mark here, but with the little knobs that you have or that were original to it, and some of the shapes that are on the piece, it reminds me a little bit of maybe of an Ethan Allen style piece of furniture. And I don't even know what that date's at. I know we did a piece that we refinished, I think it was a couple years ago, and it was an Ethan Allen desk, and it had those little white knobs. And it even reminds me a little bit, I don't know if you guys saw the potato bin that we did with Kristen, that potato bin challenge, but it had the little white knobs and it had some of those
Yeah.
same, the scroll work at the bottom. And
Right.
I don't know, it just reminded me of that kind of era. But really, really cool piece. Now, what did you say you sealed it with?
The Chippy Barnes clear wax.
Is that just a one coat deal, or do you put that on a couple times or
I
just
usually
once?
do a couple times. I really like using clear wax over bare wood pieces.
Well, you have to describe your style for us too. You got an advantage, Rachel, because you heard me ask that question to Deanne and Megan.
It is a hard question. I I really like farmhouse, vintage, chippy, distressed. But I do a lot of custom work too, so I like to be challenged by customers if they want something different. But I
Yeah.
do tend to be more farmhouse and vintage.
Well, congratulations on winning first place, Rachel. Remarkable job. Share your Instagram account with our listeners.
Sure, it's Upcycled Smithery at Instagram.
This podcast is sponsored by Zebra, makers of the high-quality yet affordable line of paintbrushes. We set out this season to create unique paintbrush kits that provided all the brushes you need for different types of applications. We have our furniture paintbrush kit, detail kit, room makeover kit, crafting kit, and our best of Zebra paintbrush kit that features 5 of our most popular brushes. All kits come in a canvas bag with a cute saying printed on them. If you haven't had a chance to check them out, take a few minutes and go to enjoyzebra.com to see the selections. It's time for our Zebra panel discussion. Today's topic among our Zebra Review winners is, well, you guessed it, exposed wood. We thought it was an appropriate topic since our theme for the contest was earth tones, and many of you went with exposed wood with your entry pieces. Our topic of exposed wood can go in any direction our winners panel decides, like how do you know when to paint and not to paint, and maybe how to highlight exposed wood well and effectively. So we'll see where it goes. Okay, since it's cold in most places this time of year, let's imagine you all are sitting outside on a sunny day, temps around, let's say 70 degrees, slight breeze out of the south with birds chirping, and you guys are sipping on your favorite coffee or tea. How is that for setting the tone?
Oh my gosh.
You like that?
Sounds amazing. Yes, I feel that.
Oh,
All of it.
good. Yeah, you feel it. All right, podcast friends, we're listening in on these three discussing furniture refinishing with an emphasis on exposed wood. It's all yours, Zebra Review panelists.
Awesome. Well, I can start. I know we just kind of mentioned as far as our pieces, we love that, all three of us. So I'm glad I'm in the right company here because my dad is one of the people that will always come toward my designs and say, you're going to paint that. And so I feel like with every piece, I have to take a step back and say, okay, can I keep any wood on this piece? Like, can I keep some of the original? So I feel like with every piece, it's almost like a little surprise. Like I love to sand down just a little bit to see what that wood can possibly be. And so I think there's sometimes where pieces, you just know there's no saving it. But then for every piece like that, there's those ones that are just like a diamond in the rough that you never expect the finish to be as beautiful underneath as it is. So I know for myself, I like to try and keep a little bit of that wood grain if I can. What about you guys?
I always try to keep some kind of wood. I think most of the pieces that I do at least have a wood top, but I try to incorporate as much as I can. I love that. I love seeing wood grain.
Yeah, definitely. I think what's so special, I think sometimes too with these old pieces is a lot of times they have really dark, thick stains on them. And so when you first get the piece, you don't necessarily think like, oh, this wood on the drawer or the top is going to be so beautiful. And so a lot of times, like Megan said, you don't necessarily know until you actually go and sand some of it. And I always like, I love that surprise, of being like, okay, I'm going to prep this piece, and you start sanding and you're like, oh my gosh, this is beautiful. And a lot of times I can't cover it all up. I have to keep some part of that wood exposed. I just love the contrast.
Totally. And I think sometimes as far as like maybe a good tip too, like when I am going to start that process, like it can be so exciting to try and reveal the wood, but you also want to make sure that you don't get too overzealous, because I've done that before where it's like, oh, I just want to sand it off. But like making sure if it's a veneer top or not,
Yeah.
because you can blow through those veneer tops really quickly.
Right.
So trying to have a little patience, which I need to teach myself to do sometimes, just so that you don't kind of ruin it and go through it too fast.
Right. I think it's important to try to look, like if you want to keep the top wood, right? Take a look at it first and say, okay, is this a veneer? Is it solid wood? Are there, chips or cracks or really big scratches, because sometimes it just doesn't work out, that maybe you want to keep a part of it wood, but it just, isn't going to look its best if you do that part, but then maybe there's another part that could be wood, like the legs or a drawer front, and so I feel like on most pieces, if you really want some exposed wood, you can find a way to have at least a little bit.
Totally. I know that I had a like small little buffet, and it was a Hemp white one. And I had this complete vision, like it's going white, it's going to be really clean. And there was a little bit of veneer damage that turned into a lot of veneer damage. And so I had to take all of it off. But like underneath, sometimes like with your beautiful dresser, that one too, Dan, it's like you sometimes have beautiful wood underneath that you would have otherwise never seen.
Right.
And so I was able to sand it completely down, but there were like these little I don't know, like added trim pieces that stained the wood underneath. And I could not, no matter how much I sanded, I could not get those to go away. And so I was like, oh, I really don't want to paint the wood, but I needed a solution. So I know for myself, sometimes I have to like take a day, even maybe a couple more, but I find like 24 hours to just sleep on it and kind of come up with a different solution. And I ended up painting those with like just frog tape. I outlined it. And that's like one of my favorite pieces that I've done. Just by adding a little bit of the paint to that area, I was able to keep the wood at the same time. So it's about finding, I think, that balance and being strategic. It's kind of fun to come up with those solutions if you're really interested in keeping that exposed wood.
Yeah, definitely. I think, like, because if there are small sections of damage, like a veneer chip or missing trim or things like that, I mean, sometimes, it could work like to paint, some lines or, some sort of design on the piece, even like with a stencil, so that you can kind of strategically cover some spots that you need to paint, but then still have some wood element to it. And I think a big part of it too, though, is also kind of assessing, like, as much as maybe you want to keep those curvy legs wood on a buffet, right? But if they're not the color you want, do you really want to take the time to sand them or strip them? Sometimes it's just not practical to get to the raw wood, to be realistic, right, about it.
I was going to say, I love sometimes when I get a piece and it's full of veneer damage, like the Hemp white dresser I just did. When I picked it up, it was someone had already started stripping the veneer off and gave up. But I knew, like, to me, that's like half the work is done. And when I got done peeling the rest of the veneer off, I was just amazed at how awesome the wood was underneath the veneer. So, I mean, when I see peeling veneer, as much as I hate getting it all off, I get really excited because I love exposing that wood. It's usually awesome underneath.
Yeah, it's exciting to see like what's hiding underneath.
It is. It's like a surprise. You're opening a present. I was going to ask Rachel, I've never used the white stain before, but that you said was Minwax, correct? The brand that you used?
Yeah. And
I love that. I think that that's a great way to just like change it.
Yeah, I just, I didn't even know it existed. I stumbled upon it one day at Lowe's, just grabbed it with a bunch of other things. And I experimented with it when I was doing a piece that just the the wood still has too much of a gold tone to it after you sand it down, and just wanted to lighten it up a little bit. So yeah, that works so well. And liming wax too.
Oh yeah.
Works really well to lighten the wood.
Yeah, that's a great tip. I think sometimes you have that wood exposed, but yet it might not work with the design that you have in mind, like the color. So I love hearing about some of those different products that you guys have used. That I've used more of like a white wax before, but I like the idea of a stain sometimes with a wood top, or, just to have that extra durability. That's a great idea. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. I think, Rachel, didn't you say, so you sealed it with wax too? And I feel like I tend to not necessarily use wax to seal the raw wood portions as often. It came out really beautifully on that piece. I'm going to have to try that now.
Yeah, I used to be like a poly girl all the way. And I got some of the Chippy Barn wax. I've kind of been addicted to it. So I don't use wax too much over painted pieces, but I really love how it looks and feels over natural wood. So I've definitely been tending to use more wax over wood now.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
That's awesome. Do you feel like you're pretty confident in identifying different types of wood? I feel like I always have to like phone a friend in order to be like, what is this?
Yeah.
I love it, but I don't know what it is.
I know.
I'm getting a little better, I think, but
it is.
Right.
Really
bad. That's really hard. I think I would love to get better at that, like to pick up a piece and be like, oh, this is walnut or this is maple. But yeah, I'm definitely not there yet. But I think, that'd be really great to know.
At one point had this little book that kind of shows you a small little snippet of wood, but every piece of wood is so different that you I feel like there's some that are pretty easy to identify. Like I feel pretty good. Like, oh, I can tell that that's pine, or like you can tell certain mahoganies, they'll be a lot more likely to bleed and be red. So I know at least for that one, I've been able to try to identify it. So that way, when I do go to maybe lighten the wood a little bit, it doesn't turn pink, because once you do that once, you're like, that's not really a cute look. So
that's not the look you were going for. Yeah, totally. Yeah, I know. Maybe being able to identify the wood on some pieces would help kind of in your initial design plans, and steer what you want to do with the wood if you're keeping any wood natural on it or staining it, because just knowing what it's going to do or how it's going to take a stain and things like that would help. We're going to have to start studying.
Totally. Phone a friend, like, what wood is this?
Yeah, that's a good option.
But I think I know we kind of touched on it, but I think probably the coolest thing about what we do maybe is the fact that you can oftentimes see those really dark finishes, like you mentioned, Deanne, that are on Facebook Marketplace that look so dark and dooming almost, but knowing that they can be transformed to something so light and airy now, it's a pretty cool thing. So
for sure.
I love that.
What about stripping paint off of pieces? Have either of you guys done? I mean, taking veneer off is one thing, right? Because then you're most likely exposing raw wood underneath, right? But what about if you find a painted piece and you're like, hey, let's take this to natural wood? Do either of you guys like to do that very much?
Like to do it.
I say like with like air quotes,
right? Love what it looks like after.
Right.
No, that's where I was going to say I'm so impressed by your piece that you did with your client, just because sometimes that's even more unknown when you go into a piece, what can be underneath. Right. So I don't feel like I tend to take on those projects now, but if it were to be, I think, a client-owned piece or like an heirloom or someone knows what's underneath potentially, or
Sure.
willing to maybe compensate all that work.
Right.
I will take that on.
Yeah.
But not as much anymore. I think in the early days, I would have been very like, oh, it's a free dresser. I don't care if it's painted, like I'll strip it down. But now I think
Yeah.
I'm like, I'll let someone else take that on. How about you, Rachel?
I have definitely stripped things down, not having in my head that I was going to take it down to natural wood. But yeah, I have had a piece that had a ton of like white and purple paint all over it. And I knew I had to strip the paint off anyway. And it stripped so easily with stripper. And then once I saw what the wood looked like underneath, then I knew, I was going to sand it down a little bit more and keep it natural. But no, not usually going in like, I'm going to strip all this paint off and take it down natural. That just sounds like way too much work. I hope you charge like $1 million for that job.
It is super satisfying to see. Yeah, there you go.
Definitely. It's funny because I have like 3 painted dressers in my garage right now that are pieces that I've just picked up. I'm like, well, actually, you know what? I think two of them were gifted to me. So, but I see some wood needing to be exposed on them, and I don't know. We'll have to see when I have the strength to to start that process. But
we support you. We're here for you.
Yeah, because it's definitely a lot of work. I mean, so I think that's a big part to kind of assess in the beginning when you're figuring out, the design of a piece is, do you want to tackle stripping paint or a thick stain or varnish or things like that? Is it worth doing that? Yeah, especially with the resale factor. Yeah. I mean, if you're reselling the piece, your time is valuable. So.
Definitely. And I think a good point to make too is when you are starting off, you're trying to make those like profit margins, right? And sometimes those free dressers that have a lot of paint on them can seem really intriguing, but you also have to know that they, you might have to check for lead paint, and you want to be really careful when you're kind of undoing those paint jobs, and it can take a lot of work. So I think once you do it a few times, it's easy to determine whether or not you want to do that very often, but it can be super rewarding at the end, uncovering all that there is, and kind of that surprise factor too.
For sure. That's a really good point about the safety too, though. I mean, especially a lot of the chemical strippers, or if you had like a lead-based paint, I mean, so it's good to keep the safety factor in mind for sure.
Totally. But yeah, it's super satisfying to watch someone else strip off paint. I enjoy that. So when you get to it, Deanne, let us know, and I'll watch you do it.
Right. For sure. I don't know. But yeah, I think a big part of it too, with sort of the whole design of a piece, is I think of it kind of in relation to like maybe when I get dressed. I mean, I don't tend to wear all one color. So I really like it. It kind of reminds me of that, right? It's like, well, part of this piece is going to be painted and part of it's going to be wood. And it's just like a nice balance to have some exposed wood on pieces a lot of times. I mean, it doesn't always work, or it may not be the right vision for the piece or the right style, but I know that's definitely my style right now, at least. Maybe it'll change at some point.
Yeah. I love that comparison. That's great. Yeah, it is so fun. I know sometimes it is easy for myself to get like roadblocked when it comes to creating a design, like wanting to save wood and yet wanting to paint some of it too, where maybe it's not possible to save. But I can find that design process, or taking the vision and step by step, can be helpful. So that way it's like, okay, maybe I'll start with keeping a little bit of this wood or painting a little bit, and then that design kind of evolves in my head, and it kind of brings it to fruition, instead of just hastily painting and being like, oh man, I wish I would have kept some of that wood. Like sometimes that helps me, but other times I can get stuck thinking, oh, I should keep some of this wood, when really, like, it's okay to paint a whole piece too. So I think it's
Yeah.
finding that balance, and I think it's helpful to have just different refinishers that you can reach out to just like bounce ideas off of and kind of validate your thoughts or get yourself out of your own head. So I don't know if
Yeah.
you guys find that too.
For sure. And I think you mentioned before too, maybe sometimes taking a day or two and stepping back from the piece and giving it some time to kind of let all those ideas maybe marinate and,
Right.
decide what direction you really want to go with the piece and not. Sometimes, yeah, I think sometimes we have to get out of our own heads. We overthink it too much. Like you said, with the chippy piece too, it's like, we're not always sure. And
Totally.
so, yeah, having other people too that you can kind of check in with, phone the friend, that's definitely helpful.
Yes. I agree.
Well, I think you guys did a really good job of just, especially for those that are maybe diving into furniture refinishing and asking that question, is it okay for me to paint? But also, is it okay, to leave it exposed? You're not short circuiting the refinishing process by not painting a piece, but to really go at it and evaluate the piece effectively to determine, is there some areas on this piece where I can continue to make sure that I highlight, the wood and the beauty of the wood. I think you guys provided some great insight on that. You guys had great synergy and terrific discussion on exposed wood. I know our listeners enjoyed this week's topic. I want to give you all three of you a special thank you for joining us today to talk about your winning pieces, to give insight on exposed wood when it comes to furniture refinishing. So just thank you so much for that. And I just want to say, stay safe, stay well, and enjoy the holidays.
Oh, thank you. Happy holidays, everybody.
Thank you so much. Happy holidays, guys.
Several of you have been inquiring about our year-end contest that we started last year, the Zibra Golden Brush Awards. This year, we decided to move it out a month so that you would have the opportunity to pull any pieces you have refinished from January 1st through December 31st, 2020. In January, you will be able to peruse through all of the 10 categories and enter pieces that you believe are your best and that meet the required parameters of each of the category listings. We are working with our judges to get the contest ready. We are more than excited to see all of the beautiful pieces created in 2020. We know it's been a rather difficult year for most, but we are determined to showcase the best of the best in your work. Stay tuned as we share more details in the coming days about the 2020 Zibra Golden Brush Awards. The Zibra Review monthly contest has been announced for December, and the theme is candy canes. That's right. Those sweet little red and white candies that make their way from Christmas season to Christmas season to Christmas season. They really are more about hanging on the tree than eating them. Have you guys ever had a few make it from season to season and all the Christmas decorations stored up in the attic? Somehow you think it's a fresh candy cane, you bite into it to find out it's petrified, although it still keeps the peppermint flavor. Okay, enough of that. Well, we thought they are popular enough at Christmas and offer some cool red and white inspiration for our December contest. Any variations of reds and or tones of whites can be used on your furniture pieces to enter. Use the hashtag #TheZibraReview and you'll have your piece before a judging panel as they will choose 3 winners. The judging panel also includes guest judge Lindsay with Heirloom Furnishings. She was our first place winner for October. Great prizes await the winners from Milk Paint by Fusion, D Lawless Hardware, Surf Prep Sanding, and Zebra Paintbrushes. All pieces refinished from January 1st, 2020 to December 31st, 2020 are eligible for entry. We are so grateful for each of you, not only for listening to this podcast, of course, but also for using our paintbrushes. We love it when you tag us in your stories and posts showing what applications you're using Zebra brushes on. And that is not just furniture refinishing, but also painting your homes. We will always make it our priority to highlight your furniture refinishing works of art on our Zebra Painting Instagram account and Facebook page. But we also want to make sure we highlight notable home projects as well. If you have used your Zebra paintbrush on a home project and you want us to check it out, make sure you tag your pieces with Zebra Inspo. That's hashtag Zebra Inspo, ZIBRAINSPO. We would love for many more people to discover the Zebra Before and After podcast. Please subscribe and leave us a review on your favorite podcast directory. It really does make a huge difference in the rankings. And thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Zebra Blog's Before and After Furniture Refinishing podcast. Today's episode is also featured on the zebrablog.com along with contact information for today's guest. Your comments and suggestions for future episodes are always welcome, and we encourage you to share those by clicking on the podcast slide in our header at thezebrablog.com. That's zebra with an I blog.com. Thanks for listening. Stay safe and happy refinishing.